After my granddaughter mocked my ugly old house, she begged to live in it a year later. It was my granddaughter's idea to stream our dinner live. She called it Modern Family Dinner 3 Generations Challenge, as though our cramped dining room with the wobbling table and worn chairs was some reality show set instead of someone's home. I sat at the far end of the table in my old oak chair, once polished and proud, now showing nicked corners and faint scratches, while Katie placed her phone on a tripod opposite the plate I had set out myself. I watched her adjust the camera angle until it captured the labels of the wine bottles, the flicker of the overhead light, and me. Behind her, her friends crouched in the living room doorway, phone lights glowing like campfires. "You ready, Katie?" one of them whispered. She nodded, touched the record icon, and the viewer count started ticking up. "This house smells like dust and death," Katie announced into the camera, her voice full of that smooth mockery she'd perfected. "You should Airbnb it as a horror set, Grandma." She reached out as if embracing the screen and laughed. Her friends joined in, giggling. My daughter Linda laughed too, her hand brushing the hair from Katie's face. "Don't be mean, Katie, though she's right, Mom. You really should declutter. It's depressing." My heart stayed still. I watched the flicker in Katie's eyes, the way her smile grew wide for the camera. I pressed my lips together, simmering something silent. Their laughter filled the room like a drum roll. I picked up my fork, my palms slightly trembling but quietly. I placed the fork down carefully. I smiled then, a small, soft smile, not weak, not defeated. Something like calm that comes after you've decided you're done waiting. The phone's red record light blinked. Katie caught my smile and raised her eyebrows, as if I'd forgotten what this was. But I hadn't. I was watching them. I was cataloging everything. Later, Katie tossed her spoon down hard enough to bounce on the table. "How do you stand living in this dump?" she asked loudly, for effect. Her voice carried. The live count jumped. "Out 2,000 viewers," she said, smirking at the camera. I inhaled and said quietly, "I stand because it's mine." My words were faint, almost a whisper, but they hung there. Katie's smile faltered. She scoffed behind the camera. "Oh, wow, she stands. How noble." Linda laughed again, but this time it sounded hollow. I didn't move. I didn't correct her. I simply stood, pulled myself up from the chair, and walked down the hallway. My bedroom door was open. Inside, the light was dim. I approached the dresser drawer where I kept the things I couldn't bear to give up. I opened it, drew out the tubes of rolled-up blueprints and drawings my husband left behind. His name, Robert J. Rivers Energy Solutions, printed on the title block. I placed my hand on the drawing of the very first solar panel concept he'd designed. I touched the faint lines, the engineered curves, the date stamped in the corner 1958. I breathed in the smell of old paper and wood polish. I closed my eyes for a moment. They saw junk. I saw history. They lived on likes. I lived on memories. I slid the drawings back and closed the drawer gently. I walked to the window and looked out onto the yard-cracked sidewalk, an old swing set swaying, leaves pooling in the corners. I watched the lights flicker inside the living room, where Katie's friends were uploading the live feed. Linda was posing with a dessert, laughing with friends. My fork, my dinner, my table, all their stage. I realized my silence had weight. It was no longer empty. It was a presence. As I stood there, the house creaked a floorboard near the fireplace, just a small tremor of sound. I let it resonate. I let the memory of Robert building this house in the snow, the two of us hammering boards, the evenings by the window with coffee and hope, flood in. They thought I was fading. They thought I didn't matter anymore. But in their video, on their phone, I was watching them. I remembered. And in that memory, there was power. Silence had been my armor for years, but that night, I realized it could also be my weapon. I turned away from the window and walked back into the dining room. The camera is still filmed. Katie waved at the phone. "Thanks for joining us, everyone. Grandma's going to tell us a story next, right, Grandma?" She winked at her viewers. I paused in the doorway. My gaze met the lens. I nodded, quietly. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to speak. I still remember the smell of pine that first winter in 1957, when Robert and I built this house with our own hands. We didn't have much, just a few savings, a borrowed pickup, and a belief that if we worked hard enough, we could carve a life from the frozen Wisconsin earth. Every board we lifted, Robert would carve our initials into the frame, R+H. He said it wasn't just a mark, it was a promise that no matter what came, this house would always belong to us. He was a quiet man, my Robert. A dreamer, but practical in his hands. He worked at the local energy plant, fixing turbines and designing parts they never bothered to patent. They said he was too hands-on and not academic enough. The engineers with shiny degrees took the credit, while he took the overtime. Still, he never complained. Each night, after dinner, he'd spread his sketches across the table, rough blueprints of a solar-powered heating system. He'd tap the paper and say, "The sun's free, Helen. Imagine homes that run on light." When he was removed from a major government energy project for lack of formal qualification, I remember the quiet that fell over him. Weeks passed where he barely spoke. Then one evening, I found him on the porch, staring at the fading sun through the pine trees. He said softly, "They'll need my light one day, even if they don't see it yet." I sat beside him, wrapped his rough hands in mine, and whispered, "They will, Robert. They just don't know it yet." That winter was brutal. The heater broke twice. We took turns tending the fire, sometimes sleeping in shifts. But we finished the roof together, hammer by hammer, plank by plank, until the snow stopped falling through the cracks. Every corner of this house bears a scar of that love. The wood groans when the wind howls, like it remembers. Years later, the coughing started. At first, I only fit a little after work. Then it became worse. The doctors said it was occupational exposure, a polite phrase for decades of breathing fumes and dust. He tried to keep working, even after his hands began trembling too much to hold a wrench. One night, while I was tucking him into bed, he said, "Promise me something, Helen. Don't let them sell the house. Not for anything. I built this for you. For us," I promised. When he died, he left me his tools, his sketches, and the deed to the land. He never got the recognition he deserved, but he left something better, proof that light could live here, even when he didn't. I packed his drawings into a tin box and kept them in the bottom drawer of our dresser, beside his wedding ring and the handkerchief he used every day of our life together. Linda, our only daughter, was 20 then. She couldn't stand the house after he passed. "It's too sad here," she said. "You're stuck in the past, Mom. Dad's gone. You need to move on." She handed me real estate flyers for new homes, fresh drywall, shiny appliances, HOA smiles. We could sell this old place, buy something modern, something bright. "This is bright," I told her. "You just forgot how to look." She didn't understand. Maybe she couldn't. The world was already changing quicker, louder, less patient. She wanted to escape the creak of the floors, the smell of oil and sawdust. To her, the house was a monument to everything she wanted to leave behind. So resentment bloomed quietly, like rot under the floorboards. She began telling people, "Mom refuses to sell that dump. She's holding us back." I'd overhear her on the phone sometimes, her voice sharp, embarrassed. "She could have sold it years ago, but she's too sentimental. We could have had a fresh start. Instead, she keeps polishing dead wood." I stayed silent. I let her think what she needed to think. I baked bread in the same kitchen where Robert once measured circuits with a butter knife. I tended the garden he planted for me, even when my knees hurt too much to bend. Every bloom that rose from the earth reminded me that something once grew here from nothing. Linda moved out soon after she married. She never brought her husband here except once, for Christmas. I remember how he'd looked around the living room and muttered, "Feels like a museum." Linda didn't defend me. She just smiled and said, "Mom likes her ghosts." After that, visits became rare. Calls became shorter. And when they did come, it was only to pick up old things, silverware, antiques, furniture they wanted to rehome. Every piece taken out of this house felt like a rib being pulled from my chest. Then came Katie, my granddaughter, bright, beautiful, loud. From the moment she could talk, she loved taking photos of herself, mostly. By the time she was 15, she had already called my home the zombie cabin. She said it with laughter, but behind her tone was the same irritation her mother had carried for decades. They said my refusal to sell had buried our family's future in old wood. By clinging to this place, I'd kept everyone stuck, but I never asked them to stay. I only asked to remember. And maybe that's what they couldn't forgive me for, that my love for what came before their hunger for what's next. So they moved forward, and I stayed. Alone, but not lonely. Surrounded by Robert's initials on the beams, by the quiet hum of what he'd built, by the light he once promised would come. They saw a relic. I saw a heartbeat. And though they mocked the dust on my windowsills and the creak of my stairs, I never forgot what this house really was. It was love made solid wood and will and memory. And someday, I knew, they'd come to understand what it costs to forget where light begins. Katie had found her audience long before she'd found herself. At 25, she had nearly 70,000 followers who adored her thrift shop sarcasm and glossy aesthetic. She called herself a nostalgia influencer. But what she really sold was mockery wrapped in filters and pastel captions. One evening, I opened her Instagram out of curiosity. I shouldn't have. There it was, a photo of my house, its front porch, my chipped blue door, and the crooked mailbox Robert once carved. Her caption read, "Haunted grandma aesthetic, vintage creep dead energy." Underneath, comments poured in. Creepy but kinda cute. I'd totally film a horror short there. And Katie, quick with her poison sugar, replied, "Yeah, she's the witch that built it." I stared at that screen for a long time, then closed it. I set her dinner on the table, as always. Meatloaf, green beans, mashed potatoes, the things she said made the house smell like retirement. She didn't come down to eat. The plate stayed warm until the butter film hardened. I scraped it into the bin and said nothing. The next morning, I arranged the dried flowers from last fall into the old ceramic vase by the window. I still kept fresh blooms when I could afford them, but in winter, the garden offered only brittle stems. So I kept them. They still had shape, and that mattered. Later that week, I decided to make her something real, something from before the filters and trends. I pulled out the box of old photographs. Robert in his work coat, sawdust on his shoulders. Linda as a little girl, her hair in messy braids. Even baby Katie, asleep on my chest. I glued them carefully into a scrapbook I'd bought at the thrift store. Each page had a note in my handwriting: your mother's first snowfall, your grandfather's last project. The daylight filled the house again. When I handed it to Katie, she smiled politely for about 2 seconds before pulling out her phone. "Oh my God," she laughed. "This is like ancient history." An hour later, I saw her post a story, a photo of the album with my handwriting showing through the plastic sleeve. "Scrapbook from the crypt, Th Nana." That night, I found the album tossed on the couch. I picked it up, brushed off the lint, and carried it back to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed, turned each page, and felt the grooves of my pen in the paper. Then I took out a roll of lamination sheets I kept for recipes and sealed every photo, one by one. If she couldn't value them, I would preserve them from her. A week later, she came home with a new project. "I'm going to start flipping furniture for content," she said, rummaging through the storage room. "Rustic upcycling is trending. Old stuff gets crazy engagement." Her eyes landed on Robert's oak cabinet, the one he'd built by hand the year before he died. "This piece is perfect. Once I sand it down and paint it pastel, it'll be gorgeous." I stepped between her and the cabinet. "That's your grandpa's hands you're selling," I said quietly. She blinked, confused. "What?" "He built that with his hands. Every groove, every hinge. You don't get to sell it for a hashtag." Katie laughed. "Then he built junk." My throat tightened, but my voice stayed calm. "He built us, Katie. You just forgot." She rolled her eyes, phone already up. "Don't be dramatic, Nana. It's just furniture." But it wasn't. It was the last thing Robert touched before the coughing took him away. It was where he kept his blueprints, his unfinished sketches, the dreams that carried his name. After she left the room, I opened the cabinet and ran my fingers along the inside panel. There, still faint but readable, were the carved initials R+H. I pressed my palm against them and whispered, "They see junk, Robert. I still see you." I stood there for a while, listening to the sound of her laughter drifting from upstairs, a hollow, synthetic laugh that belonged more to a phone than a person. I wondered when kindness had stopped being enough, but I didn't let the bitterness take me. I just started remembering louder. It started with the title, Decluttering Grandma's Ugly House Challenge. Katie's thumbnails always looked the same: wide grin, exaggerated shock face, pastel background, but this one had something crueler behind the teeth. I saw it pop up on my own phone by accident, a notification I didn't ask for. The caption underneath said, "Today we're helping my Nana detox her haunted hoarder life. Vintage purge." I should have turned it off right there, but I didn't. I heard her laughter echoing from downstairs, the bright, artificial tone she used when she was on. Then came the crash of something breaking. I made my way down slowly, one step at a time, my hand gripping the wooden rail that Robert had carved himself 70 years ago. The living room was unrecognizable. Katie had moved the furniture into piles, setting up ring lights and a neon live sign. Thousands of little hearts floated across her phone screen. She was waving a broom like a wand. "If it smells old, it's gone," she declared, tossing a bundle of dried flowers into a trash bag. Her friends giggled off camera. The audience poured in. "Burn it!" one comment read. "You're saving her from ghosts," said another. Then she picked up the old wall clock, the one that had ticked through every Christmas, every winter storm, every night I waited for Robert to come home safe. She held it high for the camera. "This, my friends," she said, "is what time looked like before electricity." The clock hit the bin with a hollow clang. The viewers loved it. Laughing emojis filled the feed. Next came the broom, the lace curtains, the oil lamp. Then, God help her, she reached for the photo frame on the mantel. It was our wedding picture. Robert in his best suit, me in a borrowed dress. We were both smiling, sun in our hair. She held it up like evidence of a crime. "Look at this. Straight out of a history textbook, say goodbye." Before she could drop it, I stepped forward. "Stop." The air in the room shifted. The comments froze on screen, thousands of watching eyes. She turned to me, half amused, half annoyed. "Nana, you're on camera," she said, her voice sing-song. "I don't care." I looked straight into the lens. "You're not cleaning memories, you're erasing them." Katie tilted her head, smiling with perfect cruelty. "Memories don't pay bills." The audience roared with laughing emojis. Someone typed, "Savage Queen." I didn't flinch. I just looked at her, really looked, and for a second, she seemed small, even in all that light. I turned, picked up the wedding photo from her hands, and walked away. The video didn't end there. Someone clipped it, titled it, "When Grandma Snaps on Livestream." Within hours, millions watched, but they didn't laugh. Not this time. Comments changed. "This feels wrong. Who treats family like that?" She threw away their wedding photo. Jesus. By midnight, the hashtags turned against her. Cruel content, respect your elders, haunted by guilt. But I didn't read any of it that night. I was already downstairs in the basement that smelled of cedar and dust. It had been years since I'd come here. The old workbench still sat against the far wall, covered with jars of screws, paint cans, and boxes labeled in Robert's tidy handwriting. I knelt beside the worn floorboard near the furnace. The corner was loose. It always had been. I pried it open with a butter knife and reached underneath. My fingers brushed cold metal, a small silver key. I walked to the back wall, where an old filing cabinet stood. Its bottom drawer had a false back, the one only Robert and I knew about. I slid the key into the lock. The latch clicked open, with a sound that felt like breath after years underwater. Inside lay a narrow safe box, edges worn smooth. I set it on the table and turned the dial carefully. Click. The lid lifted, and there it was. The documents. The full schematic of Robert's solar energy design, his blueprint for extracting power from light through lithium conversion. At the top of the notebook, in his slanted handwriting, "Light from lithium." Beneath the sketches lay the deed to the land never re-registered, still bearing both our names. And beside it, a small notebook filled with calculations, signed, Robert J. Rivers, 1958. I traced his name with my fingertip. They wanted me erased, I whispered. Let's see them read my signature now. For a moment, I imagined Robert standing behind me, his gentle nod, his steady hand on my shoulder. The furnace rumbled, almost like laughter. Upstairs, the faint echo of Katie's phone notifications rang through the floorboard's pings, alerts, and the hollow sound of digital outrage. She was learning, perhaps for the first time, that not all attention is admiration. I closed the safe, locked it again, and placed the silver key into the pocket of my cardigan. Then I looked around the basement one last time. The walls were cracked, the air heavy, but I felt something stirring under the dust. A hum. The same hum that used to fill this space when Robert worked through the night. I smiled. They thought they were the only ones who could build an audience. But I knew something they didn't. Light travels further than sound, and truth burns longer than trends. That night, for the first time in years, I slept with the light on. The morning after the live stream, the house was quieter than it had been in years. Katie hadn't spoken a word to me since her followers turned toxic, as she called it. She spent most of her time upstairs, pacing, deleting posts, and swearing under her breath at her phone. I moved through the house as if nothing had happened, watering the plants, dusting the mantel, refolding linens she hadn't noticed in months. But inside, something had shifted. The humiliation had burned away the last trace of hesitation. For the first time since Robert's passing, I felt awake, clear, steady, dangerous in a way only patience can make you. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table and opened the old rotary phone book Robert and I had kept for decades. Most of the names were crossed out, neighbors long dead, friends moved away, but one caught my eye. Dawson, Herald Legal, Robert's lawyer. He'd helped us with the land rights when we built this house. I hesitated, then opened my laptop and searched. Harold Dawson, deceased 2012. But below it, Ella Dawson, attorney at Law Intellectual Property Division, Madison. Why? I called. Her voice was crisp, younger than I expected. Dawson Legal, this is Ella. Ella, I said. You don't know me, but you know my husband, Robert Rivers. He worked with your father on some patents. There was a pause. Then, Mr. Rivers, the solar conversion prototype? My father mentioned that case once, said the man was ahead of his time. I closed my eyes. He was, and I think it's time he stopped being forgotten. We spoke for nearly an hour. I told her everything: the lost patent, the house, the blueprint titled Light from Lithium. She asked me to scan the documents and send them securely. By evening, she called back, her tone sharper now, edged with excitement. Mrs. Rivers, you're sitting on something remarkable. The patent expired because it was never renewed, but the intellectual rights were never reassigned. And under state law, that makes you the surviving spouse, the sole heir, and rights holder. I smiled into the quiet. Then, it still belongs to us. To you, she corrected. And if you're open to it, I can help you refile and secure it under a holding trust. It'll protect both the patent and your land from any private sale attempts. That night, I read through every page of Robert's notes, my fingers trembling over his faded pencil lines. He'd dreamed of giving people light. I realized now I could still make that happen. The next week was a blur of paperwork, notarized forms, and video calls. Ella guided me through every step with precision. We founded Helen R. Holdings, a clean energy heritage trust. The house, the land, and the patent rights would now be its core assets. Not mine, not Linda's, not Katie's. Protected, untouchable. When Ella sent the confirmation document, she added a note. You've just made history, Mrs. Rivers. Most people want revenge. You built a legacy instead. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. A few days later, Katie came bounding down the stairs with a wild grin, the kind she wore when she thought she'd had a brilliant idea. Nana, she said sweetly, I've been thinking, maybe it's time we sold the house. You could move somewhere easier, senior apartments or something cute by the lake. I'd handle everything. You'd get to relax, and I'd finally have space to start my new studio. It's a win-win." Her words dripped sugar, but her eyes were calculating. I pretended to hesitate, then smiled gently. "Maybe you're right, dear. It's time someone young took the reins. You go ahead and start the paperwork. Just make sure everything's done properly." She blinked, surprised by how easily I agreed. "Seriously?" "Yes. You've got such a good head for business," I said softly. "I trust you." She nearly tripped over herself, rushing to her laptop. For the next few days, I heard her typing late into the night, talking to agents, bragging on calls. "It's prime land," she said to someone. "Old structure, sure, but the location is gold. Once it's cleared, I can rebuild minimalist, eco-modern style. It'll sell for triple." I bit back a smile. 2 weeks later, she was dressed in her best blazer, makeup perfect, keys in hand. "I'm heading to the bank, Nana. Big day." "Be careful," I said. I spent the next hour in the garden, pruning dead stems, listening to the sparrows chatter. When she burst back through the door, her face was white. "What did you do?" she gasped. I looked up. "Excuse me?" She waved a stack of papers in the air. "The bank says the house isn't ours. They said it's registered to some Helen R. Holdings. What is that?" I wiped my hands on my apron. "A trust," I said simply. "You transferred ownership without telling me?" "I didn't transfer it," I corrected. "I protected it. The property and the patent rights were always Robert's legacy. They're secured now, legally. You can't sell what doesn't belong to you." She stammered, eyes darting. "But that can't be legal." "It's perfectly legal," I said. "The documents were filed through Dawson Legal under federal intellectual property protections. The land and patent are registered as heritage assets under a clean energy trust. No one, not even family, can alter it without board approval." Her voice cracked. "Board? What board?" "Me," I said, "and one very good lawyer." She sank into a chair, stunned. All her confidence, her influencer bravado, her hashtags gone in an instant. On her phone, she scrolled through old videos, her metrics collapsing under the weight of public outrage. "You ruined my career," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "You filmed yourself doing that." Upstairs, her phone pinged again, an email from the bank. "Ownership registered under Helen R. Holdings, protected by intellectual property law." I returned to my garden. The light was golden, soft, warm on the old wood of the porch. Katie stayed inside, quiet for once. And for the first time in years, I heard the house breathe again, steady, alive, safe. Robert's initials still rested on every beam, but this time I could almost hear him say, "You did good, Helen. You brought the light home." The sound of the glass door slamming open broke the calm of the law office. Katie burst in first, her phone clutched in her hand like a weapon, followed by Linda, whose lipstick had been smudged from shouting before she even got inside. Both were breathing hard, angry, and desperate. "She's senile," Linda screamed before the receptionist could even stand. "She doesn't know what she signed. She's being manipulated." Behind them, I entered slowly, cane in hand, wearing my navy cardigan and the same calm expression I had practiced my entire life. The air was cool, professional, scented faintly of lemon polish and ink. I nodded to Ella, who was already waiting in the conference room, files neatly stacked before her. Ella rose politely. "Mrs. Rivers, please have a seat." I sat down without a hurry. Katie and Linda stood opposite, too restless to sit. Linda's voice cracked. "You tricked her into signing those papers. You took advantage of her age. We're going to sue you for exploitation of a senior citizen." Ella didn't flinch. She adjusted her glasses, clicked a remote, and a projector screen lit up behind her. "Actually," she said evenly, "I'm glad you brought that up, because the only evidence of elder abuse in this case doesn't point to my client. It points to both of you." A video started to play. It was the live stream. Katie's voice filled the room, bright and venomous. "If it smells old, it's gone." The room fell silent, except for the sound of the clock smashing into the bin. Linda shifted uncomfortably as the comments flashed across the bottom of the screen. Millions of people laughing, mocking, then turning horrified. Katie's voice again. Memories don't pay bills. Then me, standing quietly. You're not cleaning memories. You're erasing them. Ella turned off the video. This clip has over 8 million views. It's been documented as an instance of public humiliation and emotional abuse toward an elderly family member. Combined with the testimony of Mrs. Rivers's neighbors who witnessed similar behavior, this is more than enough to disqualify any claim of coercion. Linda's mouth opened, then closed. Katie's face was pale. Ella continued, her tone cool and precise. As for the documents, Mrs. Rivers completed every signature in the presence of 2 notaries and myself. We have time-stamped video evidence of her reading and confirming each clause. Linda slammed her purse onto the table. She didn't understand. I looked at her and said quietly, I read it slower. That's the difference. Katie's voice cracked. You ruined us. I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. No, Katie, you filmed it. The words landed like a gavel. Katie's phone buzzed in her trembling hand, another notification, another echo of the world that had already judged her. Ella slid a folder across the table. This document finalizes Mrs. Rivers's legal ownership of both the intellectual property and the land. Furthermore, she has chosen to establish the Rivers Solar Foundation, a non-profit entity dedicated to renewable energy education. The foundation's headquarters will remain on the Rivers property, her home, permanently. Linda blinked. You're turning the house into a charity? I smiled softly. Into the beginning, Ella added, and given the terms of the trust, any attempt by family members to contest ownership will trigger an automatic investigation into financial mismanagement and elder abuse. I suggest you both think carefully before pursuing litigation. The silence that followed was dense enough to hear the hum of the ceiling lights. Linda's face crumpled, her anger had nowhere left to go. Katie looked at me not with hate now, but with the hollow recognition of someone realizing they'd gone too far to turn back. I rose slowly, steadying myself on the cane. You both wanted the house gone, I said softly. You thought it was a burden. Now it will shine brighter than either of you imagined. Robert wanted to build light for everyone. I think he'd be proud. Katie swallowed hard. So that's it? You get everything? I looked her in the eye. No, dear. I kept what was already mine. Linda covered her face with her hands. We just wanted a better life. And I wanted peace, I said. Seems we both finally have what we wanted, just not in the same place. Ella began gathering her papers. The meeting was over. As I turned toward the door, I heard Katie whisper, She planned this. I stopped. No, I said, without looking back. I endured it. Outside, the wind was cold but clean. The city lights shimmered like distant embers, and for the first time in decades, I felt no weight on my chest. When I got home, the porch light flickered once the solar bulb Robert had installed himself. I smiled at it, touched the rail, and whispered, We did it, love. Inside, on the kitchen table, sat the signed charter. The Rivers Solar Foundation. Beneath the name, the slogan Ella had chosen. Light from Legacy. I traced the words with my finger, then turned off the lamp. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive, reborn under my name, and his. I thought that would be the end of it. But the world has a way of seeing what it once ignored. The downfall didn't happen all at once. It came in waves, small, sharp, and merciless. The first ripple was a video. Someone had taken Katie's old live stream and turned it into a viral montage titled, How to Disrespect Your Grandma in 4K. It opened with her grinning at the camera saying, If it smells old, it's gone. Then cut to the clip of me standing there, holding my wedding photo, my face calm, her laughter echoing like a crack in the air. The music underneath was haunting, the kind that made silence hurt. Within hours, it had millions of views. The internet, so quick to adore, was quicker to devour. Hashtags like Justice for Helen and Respect Your Roots trended for 3 days straight. The comments were relentless. This isn't funny anymore. She mocked her own grandmother for likes. You can't rebrand cruelty. Then the second wave hit. Talk shows. Morning hosts replayed her clips between ads for coffee and car insurance. One segment ended with the line, "If you treat legacy like trash, don't cry when history throws you out." Katie's sponsors began to drop her one by one. The eco-beauty brand that had once paid her to post selfies issued a statement, "We do not endorse content that promotes generational disrespect." Her following collapsed overnight. She tried to apologize. A teary video, red eyes, shaky hands. "I never meant to hurt my grandma. I just wanted to make content people would like." But people didn't buy it. They never do. Then came the third wave. Linda. Someone online had dug into the family records, curious journalists following the viral scent, and found creative accounting in Linda's real estate business. It spread fast. Whispers of false deductions, inflated renovation costs. The IRS didn't take whispers lightly. Within a week, her accounts were frozen. She called me once, panicked, asking if I'd testify she'd been helping manage my assets. I told her the truth. "I have my own lawyer now, Linda. You'll have to speak to yours." By the end of the month, both mother and daughter had lost everything they'd bragged about. Katie's manager dropped her. Linda's clients disappeared. And suddenly, the ugly old house they'd mocked became the last unburned bridge in their lives. It was a cold Tuesday morning when I heard the knock. 3 soft taps, uncertain. I opened the door to find Katie standing there, a duffel bag slung over her shoulder, mascara streaked down her face. "Grandma," she whispered, "I have nowhere else to go." For a long moment, I said nothing. The wind from the lake carried the smell of rain and wood smoke. Behind her, the driveway was empty. No car, no cameras, no followers, just her. I stepped aside. "You can stay," I said quietly. "But this time, you'll earn it." Her eyes widened. "Earn it?" I gestured around us. The living room had been transformed since the foundation began its work. Display cases lined the walls, each holding fragments of Robert's designs, his journals, and restored solar panels. Visitors come every weekend now. Students and engineers eager to learn about light from lithium, the innovation that had begun right here. The house had become a small museum and educational center under the river's solar foundation. Katie blinked, taking it all in. "It looks different." "It looks alive," I said. "You used to call it haunted. Now people travel miles to see it." Ella had helped arrange a small grant to fund local guides for the exhibits, young interns to handle tours, answer questions, and document donations. I had one opening left. I looked Katie in the eye. "You'll be the guide." She laughed once, hollow. "You want me to work here? As what, a tour girl?" "Yes," I said. "It's a paid position." Modestly, "You'll earn enough to stay and eat, but every word you speak about this place must come from the truth. Every time you tell visitors what this house means, you'll be honoring what you tried to destroy." She looked at me as though I'd slapped her. "You're making me my own punishment." "No," I said softly. "I'm giving you a chance to rebuild." "The next morning," she began. At first, she fumbled through every line. Her voice trembled when she said, "Robert and Helen Rivers built this home by hand in 1956. Her tone cracked when visitors asked, "Are you related?" And she'd nod, eyes downcast. But with each week, something changed. Maybe guilt has its own rhythm, like light slowly warming frozen ground. She stopped wearing makeup to hide behind. She stopped checking her phone between tours. One afternoon, I watched from the kitchen as she stood in front of a group of students, pointing to a faded photograph of Robert holding a solar panel prototype. Her voice was steady, reverent. "My grandfather believed light could outlive darkness," she said. "He built this before anyone cared about clean energy. My grandmother kept it safe when everyone else wanted to throw it away." The students clapped quietly. I saw her blink fast and look toward the window, away from them. When the crowd left, she came to find me. "They asked how long I've lived here," she said softly. "And what did you say?" "I told them I'm still learning to." I nodded. "That's honest enough." That night, as the last visitors left and the sun dipped behind the trees, Katie lingered by the doorway, tracing the initials carved into the wooden beam R+H, 1956. She turned to me. It really was never ugly, was it? I smiled. Not to the ones who built it. Outside, the new solar lights flickered on warm, steady, and bright. And inside, for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Because sometimes, justice doesn't come as thunder or revenge. Sometimes, it arrives quietly, one humbled voice at a time, guiding strangers through the very legacy she once tried to erase. A full year passed, and the house that had once been mocked as the ugly old relic now stood gleaming beneath the Wisconsin sun, restored and reborn. The wooden beams Robert had carved by hand were polished to a soft amber glow, the solar panels on the roof humming quietly, catching light like they'd been waiting for this moment all along. A banner stretched across the gate, Historic Solar Heritage Home Dedication Ceremony. The local news vans lined the street, and a small crowd gathered in the yard, engineers, students, journalists, and townsfolk who'd grown up hearing the story of the Rivers family. I stood on the porch, holding my cane, watching the guests file in. Ella was there, smiling from the back. Even the mayor had come to unveil the bronze plaque near the steps. And, standing beside the exhibit table with a clipboard and trembling hands, was Katie, her name tag neatly pinned to her blouse. Guide, Rivers Solar Foundation. When the microphone was passed to me, I hesitated for a moment, looking out at the sea of faces, then began softly. When my husband and I built this house, people said we were foolish. The technology was new, the dream too big. But Robert used to tell me, light doesn't need permission to exist, it only needs a place to land. A murmur of smiles and nods passed through the crowd. I glanced toward the house, the same walls that had once echoed with silence and scorn, now filled with the laughter of visitors, the hum of new life. They mocked the old wood, I continued, but it carried light before they ever held a camera. Every nail here has a story. Every window has seen both pride and pain. And yet, we're still standing. Applause rose gently, the kind that feels more like gratitude than celebration. Katie stepped forward next. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted the mic. I caught her eye and gave a small nod. She took a breath. My grandmother built this place, she began. Her voice quivered, but she didn't look away. I used to call it ugly. I said it was haunted. But the truth is, it was me who was lost, too busy chasing light through a screen to see it shining right here. I was wrong. There was a long, quiet pause. Then a wave of applause, soft, forgiving, real. From the crowd, I saw Linda. She stood at the very back, sunglasses hiding her eyes, her hands clasped tight in front of her. She didn't come forward. She didn't speak. But when our eyes met, even from that distance, I saw at the crack in her armor, the silent admission. She looked down first. After the speeches, the mayor unveiled the plaque beside the steps. It read, "The Rivers Solar Foundation, dedicated to Robert and Helen Rivers, whose light built a home that outlasted darkness." The reporters clicked their cameras. I stepped aside, touching the old solar panel Robert had soldered himself decades ago. Its surface caught the afternoon light and cast a golden shimmer across the porch, then onto my hands. "He called it a dream," I whispered, "but I call it home again." Behind me, the guests began their tour, guided by Katie's steady voice. Children ran past the garden where the first prototype stood, their laughter carrying through the open windows. Inside, on the wall above the mantel, hung our wedding photograph. In the frame's reflection, sunlight danced from the panel outside, scattering across the glass until it looked as if we were standing in a halo of light. For a moment, I imagined Robert beside me, his hand warm on mine, the same hand that had once held a wrench, a pencil, and my heart. And as the crowd moved through the house, their footsteps soft and reverent, I knew this was what legacy truly meant. Not a monument, not revenge, but light that endures. Light that outlives us all. You know, people think justice always comes with noise sirens, shouting punishment. But the real kind, the kind that stays, it arrives quietly. like sunlight slipping through old curtains, warming what was forgotten. I never raised my voice. I never cursed or begged. I just waited, and when the time came, I let truth speak louder than anger ever could. This house, this so-called ugly old home, outlived cruelty. It became light again. And that's all I ever wanted. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that silence doesn't mean weakness, that kindness can still win, then please subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Because somewhere out there, another quiet woman is still waiting to be heard. Let's keep her voice and her light alive.